This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Oh my goodness. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Zach Schomler. This is Strong Opinion Sports, episode 613. Welcome in. And before we do anything today, I got to tell you about our sponsor. Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Prize Picks allows you to make an entry based on player projections, and in 60 seconds, you could enter something like George Kittle less than 5 catches, A.J. Brown more than 100 yards receiving, and Jordan Love more than 2 interceptions. If your picks are right, you can win money. Making picks makes watching games more engaging, and you could turn something like $5 into $50. Prize Picks offers quick and easy deposits. You can even use Apple Pay, and they have weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts. For example, there's a weekly event called Taco Tuesday, where each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So put your skills to the test in daily fantasy. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/CLNS, code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. All right, let's jump in. On Monday Night Football, the Detroit Lions beat the Raiders 26-14, and the game went basically exactly the way I hoped it would, because the Lions won. They're now 6-2, and it allows an opportunity to celebrate Detroit and really just say, the Lions are awesome, man. Right now, they're the #2 seed in the NFC, and I am so happy to be able to say that about Detroit. Now, for me, the very best thing about this game on Monday night was watching Lions rookie running back, former first-round pick, Jahmyr Gibbs, have, I think, his best game of the year, kind of a breakout game, and a game that was so good it made me go, okay, Jahmyr Gibbs can play. We're fine. He's not a bust. He had a slow start. They were, I think, using him, here and there early on. David Montgomery was doing great. But turns out Jahmyr Gibbs looks really good, given a huge opportunity, lots of carries. He had 26 carries for 152 yards and a touchdown. He also got 5 catches for 37 more yards. So on the day, Jahmyr Gibbs had 189 total yards on Monday night. The Raiders offense, as a group, only had 157 yards. So that means all by himself, Jahmyr Gibbs had more yards than the entire Raiders offense, which is ridiculous and insane. And this game was close for a little bit. It was 9-7 in the first half. Later it was 16-14 in the second half. I would argue that the only times the Raiders were in this game was because the Lions allowed them to be. Right in the first half, the Lions settled for 3 field goals, so it made it 9-7. In the second half, Jared Goff threw a pick six. That made it 16-14. But the reality is, to me, that the Raiders' offense was pretty horrible in this game. And the only time they were even in the game was when the Raiders were allowed to by the Lions making mistakes. So, to me, this game is all bad for the Raiders. And the reality here is that it's really frustrating watching the Raiders because they've got 2 really good players. They've got Max Crosby, this incredible defensive end, and receiver Davante Adams, both of which who are really, really good players. And it's painful to watch these 2 good players stuck on a bad team. I find it really frustrating. Like, Max Crosby is so dang good. His effort is insane every single week, getting after the quarterback, disrupting opposing offenses, and seeing his talent and his effort. Because, again, the guy gives so much in every game. Getting after the quarterback, his motor's insane. You hear that term a lot, meaning that his effort is just really, really high. And watching that effort wasted on this bad team, the Raiders, is really frustrating. Davante Adams is another guy. He had a drop. He wasn't perfect in this game against Detroit for sure, but Davante Adams should have had 2 really big, long catches that probably should have been 2 touchdowns where Raiders quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo simply missed him deep. And you're like, oh, that's the quarterback. Remember, the Raiders made a very intentional move to get rid of Derek Carr and bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. And the guy they brought in has been injured, not great. He's missing Davante Adams open deep in this game on Monday night. So, watching Jimmy Garoppolo struggle to get the ball to Davante Adams is not fun. I enjoyed this game because it was fun to celebrate Detroit. They're 6-2. They're second in the NFC, but the Raiders are really, really frustrating to watch on Monday Night Football. They're 3-5. There's no clear sense of direction. And I said it all year, bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo really did not make a lot of sense for the Raiders. It was weird. I'm like, hey, you're a mediocre football team, and bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo just makes you maintain your mediocrity. And apparently, Raiders owner Mark Davis agreed with my assessment that, hey, the head coach isn't working, the GM isn't working, the quarterback isn't working. The Raiders have now totally changed their organization. The Raiders fired their head coach, Josh McDaniels. They fired their general manager, Dave Ziegler. They also fired their offensive coordinator, Mick Lombardi. And on top of all of that, they even announced they're benching their quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. They will now be starting rookie quarterback Aiden O'Connell. And so head coach, general manager, offensive coordinator, all fired. Quarterback benched. I love this. I love all of it so very much. The Raiders were heading nowhere. It's been a disaster of a year. Their team is really mediocre. And their starting quarterback, who is mediocre, Jimmy Garoppolo, again, all he did was perpetuate that mediocrity and keep them right where they are. I've got a friend who is kind of theorizing that maybe they're tanking for Caleb Williams. I don't know, man. I am a bit concerned because I don't really know what's next for the Raiders. Are they bad enough to get Caleb Williams? I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out. What I do know very clearly is that Josh McDaniels wasn't working. Dave Ziegler wasn't working. Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't working. The moves that the Raiders organization has made recently, hiring Josh McDaniels, hiring Dave Ziegler as GM, those failed horribly. Getting rid of Derek Carr to bring in Jimmy Garoppolo appeared to fail miserably. And the guy I feel really bad for is Davante Adams. Now, I have got crocodile tears for the guy because he's making millions of dollars. Good for him. It's hard to feel too bad for a guy who's got a really cushy life and gets to play in the NFL. However, remember, Davante Adams got traded from Green Bay to the Raiders and was excited to be there. He signed a 5-year contract extension to play with his quarterback, Derek Carr. Remember, he played with Derek Carr in college at Fresno State. Then after 1 year with Derek Carr, his general manager ran Derek Carr. His coach, Josh McDaniels, the GM, Dave Ziegler, they ran Derek Carr out of town. They said, we don't want Derek Carr anymore. He's out. So they fired the guy that made Davante Adams want to be in Vegas. And then now 8 games into this year, the dudes who made that call are now gone, and it just all feels like a waste. It's like, man, we allowed these guys to run the Raiders organization. They got rid of the quarterback that made Davante Adams happy. They got rid of Derek Carr. The move they made was horrifying and bad. Not that Derek Carr is this legendary great quarterback. He's had his own issues. But, man, who won the breakup between Derek Carr and the Raiders? Right now, Derek Carr won that breakup because he's the guy who still has a job. It's pretty sad. And, again, I go back to this. I feel really bad for Davante Adams. He's stuck in Vegas on a team that is going nowhere with a quarterback who isn't helping him. I think part of why he wanted to go to Vegas was that he wanted to have a shot at a Hall of Fame career. He saw the tea leaves that Aaron Rodgers is getting ready to retire and said, where can I go play with a really good quarterback who's going to get me the football and allow me to put up really big numbers to kind of build a career towards having a Hall of Fame resume? Well, they got rid of the guy who was helping him do that, Derek Carr. Now he's stuck with Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell. No idea who his coach is going to be next year. And I just maintain I feel really, really bad for Davante Adams. All right, let's talk about Will Levis. Titans rookie quarterback Will Levis on Sunday made his NFL debut, and the dude was awesome. He was 19 for 29 passing at 238 yards. 4 touchdown passes and 0 turnovers on the day. 2 of the touchdown passes Will Levis threw, I thought, were receiver DeAndre Hopkins making a play. Hit a deep ball down the left sideline where, DeAndre Hopkins made a really good play. Beat man coverage, did most of the work. His second touchdown throw was a throw kind of behind DeAndre Hopkins that DeAndre Hopkins made a great catch on and made a big run after the catch to go get a touchdown. And on the day, he actually threw 3 touchdowns to DeAndre Hopkins. Touchdown number 3 was a throw that a deep ball where DeAndre Hopkins got behind everyone for a long touchdown. It was beautiful. It was fun. But touchdown number 4 is the one that, for me, really stood out and made me go, oh, this guy is awesome. It was a throw where Will Levis was moving right, flipped the ball back across the field left for a long touchdown, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Here's what stands out about Will Levis from his first game. The dude has a heck of an arm. The ball comes out beautifully with so much velocity, and it made me excited because it's only one game. Again, it's only one game. I don't want to overreact and say, Will Levis is the future franchise quarterback in Tennessee. It's one really good game. I don't want to freak out and monumentally overstate a bunch of stuff. But I will say, man, Will Levis didn't have a lot of turnover-worthy throws. He didn't really put the ball in harm's way. He read the defense really well, put the ball in the right spot basically every time. And I honestly did not realize the Titans offense could look the way it did on Sunday, where they are throwing deep balls, beating man coverage, throwing the ball all over the field. I really didn't realize that they were capable of that. Remember, Titans quarterback Ryan Tannehill has played in 6 games this year, and in 6 games, he only threw 2 touchdown passes. In his first ever NFL start, Will Levis threw for 4. He doubled the total of the former starting quarterback Ryan Tannehill in just 1 game. I don't know, man. I don't want to freak out. I don't want to proclaim Will Levis the franchise quarterback in Tennessee. It's been 1 game. I've seen a lot of guys have 1 really good game and do nothing after that. Like Mike White, for example, had a really good game for the Jets, was it last year? Was it already last year? It's really, time is flying by. I have no sense of time anymore. But we saw Mike White once have this incredible game against the Cincinnati Bengals, throw a bunch of touchdowns, and look what happened to him. He's not a franchise quarterback. He's the backup in Miami. I don't want to freak out over a player having a great game, but certainly what's really cool, Will Levis plays on Thursday Night Football this week against Pittsburgh. That's going to be fun to watch, see how he does. And what I feel about Will Levis right now is that I have hope. And I have hope for the first time in quite a while, Tennessee might have found a franchise quarterback. And I just want to say, I think it's so cool to feel a sense of hope about Tennessee on offense at the quarterback position. There's a long season to go. I don't want to freak out. He still has got more to prove, but I do think Will Levis basically had the perfect start, the best start he could have possibly had for his NFL debut. 4 touchdown passes, moving the ball, doubling the touchdown total on the year, throwing the football for Tennessee. It's really cool to see. And I think that, man, if you can teach this guy to read defenses, which already looks like he's got a head start on, he's running their system really well. The arm talent is a thing that Will Levis does that you can't replicate. Like his ability to throw the football and the way he does with such ease, not a lot of guys can throw the football the way he did on Sunday. And I find that really, really exciting. By the way, Falcons quarterback Desmond Ridder was outstanding in this game. He was so good, in fact, that Atlanta thought they needed to take him off the field, to take a break, to protect other teams from him. He was so good that the Falcons were like, you know what, Desmond Ridder, we just need to bench you for the rest of the year. We're just so worried. You're dominating so much. We got to protect other teams from you. So yeah, if you can't tell, I'm being sarcastic. Desmond Ridder has been benched. Desmond Ridder is no longer the starting quarterback in Atlanta. He's been replaced by Taylor Heineke. So Taylor Heineke is now the starting quarterback in Atlanta. And I feel like it was only a matter of time. It's not a shock. It's just bad news if you're a Falcons fan. All right, let's talk about the trade deadline. A bunch of moves happened during the NFL trade deadline. Number 1, the Seattle Seahawks traded for defensive end Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams was on the New York Giants. In the trade, the Giants got a 2024 second-round pick and a 2025 fifth-round pick. Not going to lie to you, I wanted to see Seattle trade for Danielle Hunter from Minnesota or Brian Burns from Carolina. I would have given up a first-round pick for either of them, quite honestly. I think a first-round pick for Brian Burns, total steal. Like, you're getting a player that you cannot find talent-wise in the draft in the first round. Seattle, though, only gave up a second and a fifth-round pick. They got Leonard Williams, and to me, that's not as good as having Brian Burns or Danielle Hunter. But still, what I'm glad to see is that Seattle made a move to make their defensive line even better. And that's what I like to see. Seattle's trying to improve their pass rush. That's something that, to me, is really kind of the last missing piece on the Seattle football team. I don't know that I love Leonard Williams. We'll see. Like, again, Danielle Hunter, Brian Burns, those are the guys I wanted to see them trade for. Maybe neither was actually on the trade block. Maybe, they tried to and it wasn't possible. This was the best move they could make. As far as that goes, I like to see this. I like to see Seattle making a move to make their defensive line better. And generally, it makes me happy to see teams acquiring defensive linemen who... Defensive linemen are so valuable in today's NFL. Think about this game. We live in a passing league, a world where the NFL is a passing league. Quarterbacks are the most important position in football. The player that attacks a quarterback and really neutralizes a good quarterback is a defensive end. So seeing Seattle find a new defensive end to make their team better makes me really happy. I will say Leonard Williams is 29 years old. He only has a sack and a half this year. That's not great. Back in 2020, he had 11 and a half sacks, so he's capable of good football, but that was a couple of years ago now. I'm skeptical but optimistic. I'm hoping that Leonard Williams can make the pass rush better in Seattle. Now, the crazy move that surprised me and frankly interests me the most is that the 49ers traded for defensive end Chase Young. That same Chase Young that in 2020 was a number 2 overall pick. He was a borderline bust in Washington, and I'm not going to lie, I have no idea how this is going to work out, but that's part of why it's fun and interesting. I love when I don't know how a story is going to end. Chase Young tore his ACL in 2021, and he hasn't played as many games as a guy normally would have going into it. This is his 4th year in the NFL. He's missed a lot of games because of that injury, but in 34 games in his NFL career, he only has 14 sacks. That's not outstanding. I thought at times he was often underperforming for Washington, and the 49ers gave up a 3rd-round pick to get him, which to me, fair value. You know, it's a not a 1st-round pick. You're giving up a 3rd-round pick can become a starter for sure, but I think Chase Young will be a starter for them. And it's low risk, high reward. Because if Chase Young could reach his potential as a defensive end, my gosh, a 3rd-round pick is going to be an absolute steal. And he's going to be playing with a loaded group. He's got Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, Randy Gregory, meaning there are great defensive linemen around him, which are going to give Chase Young really good matchups in one-on-one situations. So I think Chase Young is being put in a position to do well. I think the 49ers making a move to go get him, giving up a 3rd-round pick for Chase Young, even though he's been underwhelming and there's bust potential here. He may not work out. He has not been great like he was expected to be in Washington. But, the 49ers made 2 moves at the trade deadline, trading for Randy Gregory, then now Chase Young. I didn't think either was possible, quite honestly. I can't believe the 49ers added 2 players to what's already a really good defensive line. And it's just kind of a terrifying thought. Imagine playing Nick Bosa on one side, Chase Young on the other. Oh, yeah, by the way, you got Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave inside. It's kind of horrifying. And I'm hoping that Chase Young can go to the 49ers and become a really good, really big impact player. Because I thought, man, he had so much potential coming out of college. And so far, in my opinion, he's been kind of a bust. So I'm really hoping that he's not a bust. I'm hoping that he goes to San Francisco and kills it and it's fantastic and becomes a true, legitimate, really good defensive end in the NFL. And does stuff that we haven't seen so far from him in Washington. Now, the Washington Commanders blew up their defensive line. I have been saying for weeks now that group of guys was kind of underwhelming. Given they had 4 first-round picks on their defensive line, I was like, hey, where is the high-level pressure? Where's the sacks? Where's the ability to get after opposing quarterbacks? It really hasn't happened. And Washington, I think, agreed. They kind of gave up on that group. They got rid of Chase Young. The Commanders also traded away defensive end Montez Sweat. Montez Sweat got traded to Chicago. Washington got a 2nd-round pick for him. So Washington gets a 2nd-round pick. Montez Sweat is now a Chicago Bear. And I'm not going to lie to you, from Chicago's perspective, I don't hate this move. I find it a little bit baffling because, why did Chicago do this? I think Chicago continues to invest in their defense, which feels like the exact opposite of what they need to do. They've got this really talented young quarterback, Justin Fields, and I think they need to spend money and free agency money and trade whatever. You got to make moves to support your young quarterback, Justin Fields. Remember, this offseason, the Bears' big moves they made were adding in free agency 2 linebackers, TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, excuse me. And I remember thinking, how does that make your team better? It doesn't help your young quarterback. Are you missing the point? Your entire focus as a franchise right now has to be on your young quarterback, Justin Fields, and making him succeed. I will say, though, Montez Sweat isn't terrible. He's got 6.5 sacks this year. He does make Chicago better. It is funny to me that, again, Chicago keeps investing on defense when it feels like they really need to support their young quarterback, Justin Fields. But I don't know. I don't want to rip Chicago here because adding a defensive end is the move to make if you're going to try to make your defense better at all. And I think a good pass rush can really improve the rest of your team and the rest of your defense. I don't hate it. Again, I'm not going to attack Chicago here. I don't think you really ever are. I just don't think it's too big of a risk to add a good pass rusher. It's not a terrible thing. I do wish there were other players available. I think they could have made a move for to make their offense better, which I feel like is what they really need. But I think the biggest reason I'm hesitant to embrace the Montez Sweat trade is that I just don't trust Bears general manager Ryan Poles at all. I don't philosophically adding a defensive end is the right move. I like it. I've been so unimpressed by the moves Ryan Poles has made so far during his career as the Bears general manager that I'm like, okay, we'll see. We'll see if it works out, but I'm hopeful that the Bears got a good one, and I don't know how this is going to help them win football games this year. I don't know that. Gosh, we'll see, man. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope that Montez Sweat makes a huge impact and is a home run, but I just think the Bears they've lost sight of what their focus has to be on, which is their young quarterback. You got to do everything you can to help your young quarterback succeed, and if you do that, you're going to win a lot. And all these moves on defense feel like a distraction. I'm like, what are we doing, man? Okay. Now, the Minnesota Vikings traded for quarterback Josh Dobbs. This, to me, was a response to Kirk Cousins tearing his Achilles. Remember, Kirk Cousins, their quarterback, is out for the year. Josh Dobbs is a decent veteran quarterback. He started 8 games this year so far for Arizona, threw 8 touchdowns, had 5 interceptions, did some good stuff. I like Josh Dobbs as a person and as a leader. And the only other quarterback right now in Minnesota is 5th-round pick rookie out of BYU, Jaren Hall. So I have no doubt that in time, Josh Dobbs is going to become the starting quarterback in Minnesota. They brought him in to be their starting quarterback, quite frankly. Jaren Hall, I doubt, is ready to be a starter. What's interesting, though, Arizona traded for Josh Dobbs during the preseason. He was filling in for Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is ready to come back, so they're getting rid of Josh Dobbs, moving him out. Minnesota got Josh Dobbs and a 2024 7th-round pick. Arizona got a 2024 6th-round pick from Minnesota for Josh Dobbs. And the guy I feel kind of bad for here is Josh Dobbs himself. This is crazy, but it's the 3rd team Josh Dobbs has been on since the year started. Early in the preseason, he got traded for, I guess not even early. It was like middle of the preseason, kind of late in the preseason. He got traded from Cleveland to Arizona. And then now, 8 weeks into the year, he's been traded from Arizona to Minnesota. So again, going from Cleveland to Arizona to Minnesota in the span of like 3 months is insane. And we give all these young quarterbacks so much time to learn a new offense and gel with the system. And like, we're like, young quarterbacks, give him 3 years. He's got to learn the system. Josh Dobbs has been expected to play with only days of notice learning a new system. And the guys had to move around a ton. I don't know. I just feel kind of bad for Josh Dobbs. He's had this weird journey. Cleveland, Arizona, now Minnesota, all within the span of like 3 months. I mean, I think the fact that he's expected to play well in a new offense literally days after being traded is something that deserves respect, because he's actually, I think, all things considered, did very well in Arizona given that situation. And I think given what they got at receiver in Minnesota, he could do a decent job. Not great. He's not going to be a home run hitter. He's not amazing. He's got a limited arm. There's all these little asterisks you got to put next to Josh Dobbs' name. But I like him. He's fun. And, I find myself rooting for him everywhere he goes just because of his story, because of who he is, the way he carries himself. And you got to admire a guy who's had to move that many times in the span of 3 months. That's a lot. And learning a new system in the NFL is not easy and not something I would want to do at all. Now, the Jaguars have traded for left guard Ezra Cleveland from Minnesota. So Minnesota got rid of their left guard Ezra Cleveland. The Jaguars now have a new starting left guard. They made this move to make their offensive line better. I like it. And in return, Minnesota got a 2024 6th-round pick. Finally, the last one I want to talk about. The Detroit Lions traded with Cleveland for receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think this is actually very interesting for Detroit. Donovan Peoples-Jones is 6'2", kind of a solid receiver. Last year, the dude had 61 catches for 839 yards. He just really wasn't getting used this year in Cleveland at all. And Detroit gave up a 25 6th-round pick to go get him. And Detroit needs help at receiver. Marvin Jones Jr. recently walked away from the game, at least stepped away, whatever that means, to deal with personal issues. I don't really know what's happening with Marvin Jones. I think on kind of low-key, this is a good move to add depth at receiver for Detroit. Donovan Peoples-Jones is also only 24 years old, so he could come in and be a solid contributor and maybe long-term could become a decent player for them if they sign him a new contract and keep him in Detroit. He's young enough. There's legs on his career where he could play for maybe, if they like him and they can keep him financially, which I think is very possible, he could play the next 6 years in Detroit very happily. I think he's going to be a great addition there and a good role player at receiver who could have a couple key catches in big moments. And I think this is a very Donovan Peoples-Jones is not a popular name in the NFL, but he's actually a pretty good receiver. And I think it's kind of a low-key good move by Detroit to bring in a guy who can contribute and do some good stuff for them, maybe for years to come. So that's a trade deadline. Let me know what moves surprised you the most. I thought that the Chase Young trade, really, the Washington Commanders blowing up their entire defensive line was surprising. I'm so happy to see Josh McDaniels get fired. Not because I hate him, just it wasn't working. And I think that's, you see the Raiders are willing to fire their head coach when things aren't working. But for some reason, the Chargers refuse to make a change at head coach. That's baffling and confusing to me. Leonard Williams is a bit underwhelming for Seattle. I think they could have got better from a defensive end. Maybe I think Montez Sweat would have excited me more, frankly, than Leonard Williams. But I've got an open mind there. And, man, Will Levis, you guys. Will Levis looked frankly really good. I'm very cautious here. I don't want to overreact and proclaim Will Levis the next great quarterback in the NFL. Nothing like that will happen from me. I'm very cautious with my takes these days. But dude, Will Levis did some good stuff, and his arm is watching Will Levis throw the football is so much fun. I'm just like, wow, look at that football. Look at that spiral. Look at the way it comes out of his hands. Oh my goodness. And Will Levis plays a really good Steelers defense on Thursday night. That's going to be interesting. But, let me know what you think. Which trade deadline move spoke to you? What do you think of Will Levis? And are you excited for Thursday Night Football to watch Will Levis once again? I think it's kind of a gift from God. We get to watch him on Prime Vision, so we get to see the defense is playing against Will Levis in his second NFL start. I really couldn't ask for a better way to watch Will Levis play, frankly. I love watching games on Amazon because of Prime Vision, and Thursday Night Football is going to be really, really fun. Guys, I love you. I appreciate you. Hope you have a great day. Short episode today. How do I even say this? I'm going through some stuff, figuring it out. So I'm doing the best I can. You'll see me tomorrow for fantasy football. We got another show planned for Friday. I love you. I appreciate you. Hope you have a great day. And bam, we are done.